So with that, I'm going to jump into the panel, sort of the highlight of today's event, where we really get to hear from some of the people who are leading this work and really hands-on. First, I'll introduce our moderator, Jane Oates, to kick off the panel discussion on really focusing on how the key distinguishers are taking shape across settings and what kinds of policy and system changes are necessary to remove some of the structural barriers that we've identified. And also thinking through some of the practices that we need to change, but also some of the non-financial barriers and financial barriers we need to address. So Jane's the perfect moderator for this panel. Not only has she been engaged in the task force throughout, she's the president of Working Nation, which is really looking at the future of work across the country and really dedicated to addressing some of the challenges in the skills gap and making sure Americans are prepared for the future of work. Her bio's in the chat, but she has a lot of expertise, including being an assistant secretary under Secretary of Labor Hilda Solis, as well as a leader in New Jersey, executive director of New Jersey's Commission on Higher Education. So again, perfect moderator for today's conversation. Jane, I'm going to pass it over to you to introduce our panelists and kick things off. Thank you.
Abby.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
Unmuted, I hope now. Thank you, Abby, for such a beautiful setup to this panel. I keep getting the signal that I'm muted again, but I'm not, I hope. And I'm so honored to be here. You know, as an honorary member of Here to Here, I've been cheering from the sidelines from the beginning. But today is really a special treat because you get to see all the words in action. Here to Here has set up such an inclusive culture in the Bronx, and you're going to hear from every member of the strategic partners, and most importantly, you're going to hear from students. So first, I'd like to introduce Alyssa Getzel, who's a teacher. Alyssa, I am a recovering teacher, so you notice I generate you first. She's at the Bronx Leadership Academy 2 High School. Welcome. Then we have Giles, the Director of Workforce Development at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Thank you, Jared, for joining us. Jessica Johnson-Cope, President of Johnson Securities. Thank you so much, Jessica. Angie Kamath, who's the Dean of Continuing Education and Workforce Development at the City University of New York. Thank you. And now we have Kilsys Payamps-Roure, who's the Executive Director of Braven. If you don't know them, get to know them today. And Leyla Reyes, the most important partner we have here today. She's a student at DreamYard Prep High School. So welcome to all the panelists and everybody in the audience. Get ready. Hopefully we'll take your questions throughout in the chat. And if we don't get a chance to answer them live today, no surprise, our friends at Here to Here have guaranteed that we'll get you answers. So please don't hold back on questions, put them in that chat. To start us off, first question, this one goes to Alyssa first. Share with us one concrete example of how you've either used or aligned the key distinguishers in your work.
Thank you for that introduction, Jane. Hi, everyone. We've been a partner with Here to Here for the last 3 years. And at Bronx Leadership Academy 2, there are different barriers that exist in advocating and creating time and space to braid work-based learning into students' academic experience. Quite often at traditional high schools, work feels very siloed and lives within individuals rather than embedded in the community. So at BLA2 this year, we've used the KDs to prioritize putting in place systems and structures in order to change how work-based learning is done at our school. We focused on collaborative design by bringing together a team of stakeholders, including counselors, administrators, and teachers. And as a team, we've leveraged our partnerships with Here to Here and New Visions to support our strategic planning for next year. We've committed to meeting each month for per session after school. And one of our goals is to focus on the data and accountability to provide opportunities for students to earn credit for their learning from work. So we are using the New Vision's data portal and its post-secondary functionalities to track CDOS hours and to build out more opportunities and learning activities within our school community. The key distinguishers have been extremely important in moving our work forward. So with that, one piece of advice that I would offer to other high schools that are aligning their work to key distinguishers would be to use the CDOS pathway as an umbrella to couch all of that work in. So not only does it add an additional pathway for students for graduation, but the performance indicators and learning standards serve as a means for creating a 4-year scope and sequence. Also, by pushing to create opportunities for students to learn for credit for their work, more stakeholders are invited to the table, which widens the work-based learning conversation within the community. So we found that our initiative and advocacy using the CDOS pathway and the framework established by the key distinguishers creates a strong administrative buy-in and support. So what I've said so far sounds like it was an easy process, but as many of us know on this call, it's certainly filled with lots of challenges. And so, like all of us here this afternoon, I believe that creating high quality work-based learning experiences and support for our students leads them in the right direction to their professional journey.
Great. And anybody knows that getting that buy-in and support, not a one-time deal, ongoing. Great. Jessica, can I go to you and ask the same question? And also let's add what Alyssa put in there. Give us a piece of advice at the end of how you tell us you've used the key distinguishers in your work.
Sure. Good afternoon, Jane. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for this opportunity to share. Johnson Security has been based in the Bronx for nearly 60 years. The firm was founded by my grandparents, and my grandmother was a public school guidance counselor. And she always saw the importance of pairing work with education. And so I stand on the strong foundation that she built in making sure that as leader of Johnson Security, I continue to encourage work-based learning and to braid work experiences into what we do here. We've had the opportunity to partner with groups like Here to Here, and that is one of the issues that we think is very critical to moving these forward. We have brought upon us, our team, a couple of interns from Here to Here, and we've introduced them to the workplace, to skills that are important in business, as well as to some of our clients. And even though we know that many of those interns will not end up working as security guards for us, we think that getting that exposure to work at a very early age is important because as we see shifts in the demographics and as we try to bounce back from COVID, it's going to be much harder for young people to get those first work experiences. And they might as well be able to get those experiences close to home. And so by working with partners and demonstrating what career success can look like for our interns, that's how we're incorporating the key distinguishers here at Johnson Security Bureau. Now, for anyone or any organization that hasn't yet found a way to incorporate the key distinguishers, we encourage you to do just like Nike said, and just do it. It's worth investing the time and resources now so that you can impact the workforce of the future. Otherwise, you'll have to deal with making accommodations for what wasn't taught in the schools, for the experiences our young people weren't afforded by not having jobs. And so it's best to get started now. Find 1 or 2 key distinguishers that work for your organization. Find another stakeholder with whom you can work and partner and put those things to work. Get it in action now. And that's how we can have the greatest impact on our young people and the economy in our communities for a long time to come.
Oh, just beautifully said. And may I just say, wonderful that you've chosen to keep your family business there in the Bronx. Wonderful. And finally, with the same questions, Kilsys, can I ask you to add your expertise?
Thanks, Jane. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Kilsys Payamps-Roure. I'm the Executive Director of Braven in New York City. So the Braven model really incorporates all of the key distinguishers, but I'm going to focus on 3 today, which is partnership, social capital, and data. The problem that Braven is trying to solve for is that each year there's about 1.3 million low-income first-generation students that go to college, but only 30% emerge with a strong job. So that's 900,000 students that went to college because they bought into the narrative, right? The promise that as long as you do so, you're on the path to the American dream, you're on the path to income equality. But we know that's not the case. Low-income BA holders earn 66 cents as much as the wealthier peers do. So in order to help solve for this problem, we partner up with colleges such as Lehman College. Renee Sarmiento, I see you on the call. I saw you somewhere, so I'm giving you a shout out. So we partner up with colleges like Lehman and also with local employers like Montefiore. Dana Politis, I saw you somewhere, so I'm shouting you out too, because these are our partners, ride or die. And what we do is we offer a 3-credit course to empower underrepresented students. So that's students who are on the Pell, students who are first generation, or students who are identified as students of color, with a 3-credit course, right? To give them the skills, the experience, the confidence, and to open up the networks, that social capital that is so key in order for them to get a strong first job or get into grad school within 6 months out of college. So just a little bit about the Bravery model to really understand more about these partners and the social capital. Students that we call fellows, they actually are placed into small cohorts of 5 to 8 other fellows. That's really important because that helps to build a sense of community and belonging. And then right there, the networks start growing just within their cohorts. Then the class, it's not taught by a professor. It is facilitated by a volunteer from an employed partner, right? A professional that we call a leadership coach. That leadership coach is so key. One of the reasons is because they also help to open up the social capital, the networks for our fellows. So innately, the model really helps to foster that social capital. Our employee partners, they really underscore the whole Braven experience. They provide the leadership coaches, like I mentioned. They also provide mock interviewers as part of the course. Every single one of our fellows gets the opportunity to do 2 to 3 interviews, right? Low risk, but high return with a professional. That's really fantastic because if you actually make a good impression, that person may be like, hey, here's my card. This internship is open in our company, or this role is coming up, and so forth. We also have a Capstone challenge, which is sponsored by our employee partners. Montefiore was actually our Capstone challenge sponsor this semester. They provide us with the real world problem. Our fellows applied design thinking over the span of 7 weeks and come up with solutions. This is fantastic, especially for fellows that don't have internship experience, because they can put that on their resume, right? That they did this. They actually solved a problem for a huge organization. And then post-course, they support, the employee partners really help to support our fellows via things like a professional mentor, which is one-on-one coaching over the course of 12 weeks with someone that's in an industry or in a role that you're interested in. They also sponsor treks, which are skill building events, and they also help with the opening up of networks. And then they provide us with internship or job opportunities that they have open in their workplace, and we're able to put them in a bi-weekly opportunity newsletter. And then with Lehman provides us with the 3-credit course, which is huge, and so forth. And one thing I want to say is, just on the topic of social capital, for our fellows, they become part of the Braven Nation, which is like over 3,000 fellows that took the course, which is really deep. And on advice of others as to like, what's one thing that you should do to align your work is, I would really focus on data when you are aligning the key distinguishers. So be data-driven and really hold it to fidelity. Set up systems that allow you to review and discuss key metrics at regular intervals to really ensure that you're constantly iterating and improving, right? This is gonna help you to tell your story, to get buying and support as an honest player. And it really also helps partners see the shared value proposition of what you're trying to do.
Thank you so much, Kilsys. Just a reminder, Allie has put the key distinguishers in the chat in case you're a little rusty on them. And you'll notice that Alyssa has already started answering questions that were directed to her. So please put your questions in the chat. And now I'm going to move to who I consider the most important person, or one of the most important people of the day, and that's Leyla. Leyla, what else should be added to what we've heard about the ingraining and aligning of the key distinguishers?
Okay, sorry.
You were
so
modeling
the
me.
one
You were
thing-
on mute. That's all right. I appreciate
Yeah, sorry guys, I'm kind of like babysitting in the middle of this meeting. But to answer your question, one thing that I can add is that applying key distinguished to high schools all throughout the Bronx can and are helping so many students, in the sense of that many students in high school are like learning independence, teamwork, communication, and most importantly, balance between work and their personal life. And, high school students, that's the main thing that we struggle. We struggle with learning how to be an adult or learning how to be responsible and be independent. Also, like with work-based learning and here and all these jobs and internships and programs, they have helped a lot of students in the sense of they've increased student leadership, student voice, they've increased student participation and even attendance. My graduating class for this year has increased to 85% because due to the programs and opportunities here has given myself and my partner to branch out to the school. And that is very rare because my school has the lowest graduation rate, but work-based learning has improved so many students that now my entire class has a plan after high school. But that's the one thing that I can really say.
Oh, and what a fabulous thing to add. Now, you heard they outed me. I have a political background, not always the most popular thing. And New York has a big election coming up for mayor. If the mayor were to call you, the new mayor, once he or she is elected, what advice would you give them? What would you tell them about being part of this task force and what you think should happen next?
It's the same thing to what I said for the first question, but I can like extend more and say more, is that it's just to continue work-based learning and don't take away that opportunity for students to know what adulthood is like, to know what responsibility is. And, because children are the future and, we have the power to make changes. So many people and so many students, even myself, are like looked up to from adults to just make a change in this life, to make a change within schools and within just children in general. From experience, when I started my first work-based learning job, the first thing I learned was teamwork. Teamwork was my weakness. I was struggling so much with trying to work with people and trying to like communicate and understand them. And, like doing this work-based learning job, I had to be comfortable with the uncomfortable feeling. I had to be okay with working with people who aren't like me and knowing how to work with people and stuff like that. So honestly, the first thing I would tell them is that to keep work-based learning, that I never knew the power and the change that it had in itself. And the fact that it is changing people within like 8 months is insane. So I would just honestly say, like, the new mayor, you need to keep work-based learning and you need to make students feel comfortable with fitting in, because my school suffers from so many issues with LGBTQ and racism and stuff. And my school is very diverse. So we already suffer with so much. And the fact that work-based learning has made them feel comfortable with just being themselves, that's just very important. And I would just tell the mayor to just keep that.
Well, let me tell you, anybody in this audience who has connections with whoever wins, please connect them with Leyla. I don't think I've heard anybody give better advice. And by the way, if you're an indication of the future's looking gosh darn bright. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for your honesty and your eloquence.
Thank you.
Okay, Jared, I'm gonna move to you, and I wouldn't want to be you for $1 million to follow Leyla. I really feel sorry for you there, but I hope you'll tell us how you and the Brooklyn Navy Yard are really partnering with employers, and how do you think they could use the key distinguishers for different things as they're moving forward?
Definitely. Thank you so much, Shane. And I agree. I do not want to follow Leyla, but I'm happy to. And I also just want to underscore everything that she said. A lot of what Leyla's referencing around work-based learning, identity, and agency for students is something that we focus on the Brooklyn Navy Yard and through the Brooklyn STEAM Center. So I completely agree with everything that Leyla said. At the Brooklyn Navy Yard, well, for some context, the Brooklyn Navy Yard is a 300-acre industrial manufacturing space with over 400 companies across engineering, design, food, film, fashion, and a lot more. My role specifically is understanding how we integrate those businesses as well as the economic opportunities built from those businesses with our student populations. That includes high school students and college students. So we do that in a couple different ways. One at the Brooklyn STEAM Center, which is a career and technical education high school on the Navy Yard. We work with employers to develop an advisory council. And that advisory council gives feedback and advises on each of the different pathways that we have at the STEAM Center. So that includes our design and engineering pathway, our computer science pathway, construction technology pathway, and our others. Employers will come into the room, meet with our teachers and our staff, talk about the curriculum, talk through the actual skills and competencies that are necessary for students to be able to succeed after they graduate from high school and go into college and go into their career. And that can be immediately implemented into the classroom to make sure that students are learning the most up-to-date technologies, programs, or skills that they need to be successful. So that's really speaking to the competencies for family sustaining careers, KD, as well as collaborative design and partnerships, really making sure that employers are always a part of those conversations. when we're developing the curriculum. Employers are also working at the STEAM Center through work-based learning. So they may come in as guest speakers, they may come in and give tours, and may host different projects at the STEAM Center. This summer, we're actually planning to host several different projects with our employers on the Navy Yard, with our STEAM Center scholars, making sure that, once again, employers are designing those experiences for students, and students get the opportunity to get out of the STEAM Center and be in a space that's a little bit different from school, but is really that real workspace that they may be able to get into, when they're actually going to their careers. Our employers also work with us across our internship program. So separate from the Brooklyn STEAM Center, we have a set of internship programs that we host throughout the year with our college students from City Tech, Brooklyn College, and other colleges around the city. The main thing there is that during the internship, we get a lot of feedback from our employers about how the interns performed, what the interns needed to know, what could have been helpful during the preparation of the interview process to know. And we're able to deliver that information right back to our college partners so that they understand what students need to know when they're coming into that employer space, when they're coming into an internship. So we've had really great relationships with our employers to say, or with our college partners, excuse me, to say, these are the things that we're hearing from employers. How can we develop information sessions or resume writing sessions or interview prep or anything like that for your students, so that they come in prepared for these different internships and opportunities.
Boy, thank you so much. I mean, really amazing work that you're doing there, and really important to see that I appreciate, and I know I speak for many others in the audience, that you put the arts in STEM, because we need the creativity of young people now more than ever. So thank you for everything that you're doing. I wish we could be there live. So know that I'm planning a personal visit once it's safe. And finally, last but not least, higher ed is such an important partner in this. Angie, what are some things that we can do as a field to get around some of the structural barriers that are so in your face and stop so many people from trying?
Sure. Thanks, Jane. And thanks so much to the Here to Hear team and family at this point. Really exciting for us to be here. And I have to acknowledge that I work at CUNY Central. It's where a lot of the policy and a lot of the more strategy happens. But we are joined on this call with many of our CUNY colleagues who are at the campus level, who work with students who are frontline, and I want to just kind of honor and appreciate all of them in terms of the work. So, we've thought a lot across the years in terms of structural barriers. And I think my couple of pieces of advice are really helping folks understand, particularly on the key distinguishers, that we can't program our way out of these structural problems, right? And so I think kind of in economic development and workforce development, sometimes, you have this idea to kind of create a great program that's really compelling, that's employer driven, that meets student needs. But when sponsorship for that program goes away or funding goes away, we actually haven't changed the system. So as I think about this question, like what are the things that we can actually do to remove some of these barriers? The first thing, and some of my co-panelists said this, I think Kilsys said this, working with the data. And we've tried really hard to bring sunlight and sunshine to the data around post-graduation wage outcomes, employment outcomes, who's working in what sector. If someone is getting trained in healthcare, why are they working in food service or retail, and vice versa, and starting to really understand those differentials that exist. And so I think only when you understand the baseline of where you are, can you actually kind of think about where you're headed. And so I think that, we have a sense that we want to do more for more people at the right points in time, but I think we actually have the data to be much more precise. And so, for example, at CUNY, we know that 1 year after graduation, we can see that the wage differential by race is actually not that, the disparities aren't there right when people graduate. Even for gender, there's a little bit of a wage disparity for our men versus women, but it's not huge. Where we do see huge wage disparities at 1 year after graduation is for Pell eligible students, students who receive Pell. And so that's like an example to sort of say, we can't solve everything. We can't solve every bit of implicit bias or discrimination in the workplace. But when we sit on data where we can absolutely tell that if you are a student at CUNY who receives Pell funding, you are going to be at a disadvantage the moment you graduate in the labor market. We have to do something with that information. So I think the notion behind what can we do to reduce structural barriers is know your data and start to get really precise on problems that you want to solve, right? In a place like CUNY with our amazing higher ed access mission and mandate, really, kind of from inception. We want to serve and help everyone, and I think that we have to think about how to start to target something for different pockets of information. Greg Mathiel, who I see has always been really active in this community, and even today, he's come up with a great idea around kind of data, and so making sure that we can start to better understand summer youth employment participation, who participates in high school, of those folks, who comes to CUNY, who participates in summer youth employment while at CUNY, so we can really start to have this research base to say it matters, or it doesn't matter, or it matters when you have 4 experiences, or it matters when you have 3 experiences. I think we just don't know. I think we have a general sense that internships and work experiences are good, but I think we actually have the ability to be much more precise. And so those are some of the pieces that I wanted to share. A couple of ways to get really tactical is set some policy goals. And again, we can never, and I've been saying this a lot to my team lately, perfect cannot be enemy of the good. And so I've always been throughout my career, good enough is sometimes good enough type of person. And I know that there's like different people that are wired differently with different, DNA here, but I would sort of say, put something out there. Let's have some policy goals that our students should have at least 3 paid work experiences before they graduate, and then just start measuring it. And I actually think if we can say in high school, let's have 3 paid work experiences, and in college, let's have 3 more paid work experiences. If we can just start to rally around some kind of concrete shared vision points, I think that would be a huge start. And again, we talk about this. I think we inherently agree on it. I think some of us even have kind of under the radar kind of policies or aspirations around this. Let's codify it. And again, it's scary to put a big, bold idea out there, because what happens if we don't meet it? And my general take is, we're not meeting it now, and something's better than nothing. So let's get started. And I think that the let's just do it that Alyssa kind of let us off on is something I couldn't agree with more. Maybe 2 other pieces that I would sort of say overall is really to think hard in terms of structural barriers. We right now, I think, largely have a system where it's opt-in. It's kind of available for some. I think we want to move to a place where a lot of what we're talking about is an entitlement for all. So we're kind of moving from this available for some to entitlement for all are some of the pieces that I think are really important. And again, I think structurally, if you believe in that, you start to think about, how do I make talking about work-based learning required in orientations? How do I have a course like Braven required for graduation for all students? How do I, if I want to go from kind of available to some to available to all, how do I think about just resource allocation and kind of how we really resource some of our offices? So I think that, bring clarity to a few key milestones feels really important. Measuring it feels really important, but understanding where we are today is probably the most important thing to know where we want to go.
That makes so much sense, right? And so far too often, we don't measure exactly where we are today. So I think that's important. So I want to take a chance. We have, again, reminding everybody that they can put their questions. The team is doing a great job answering questions as you put them in, but please don't be afraid to put your questions out. I want to go back to each of you and ask the question that I asked of our important student when I asked Leyla the question. If you had an opportunity to say to the next mayor, what does the city need to do to move the needle, to take the amazing work of Here to Here to scale, what would you advise them? Anybody jump in, or I'll call on you?
I'd like to add something. So I would implore the new mayor to involve stakeholders such as small and large businesses here in the city, and to build a system that includes co-op and internship opportunities, not just for credit, but also for pay. It's important that we don't leave our students behind by making them think that they're work mules and that they're not worthy or valuable, because they help us bring money into our businesses. We should put money into their pockets and invest in them as people. And I can recall that as a college student participating in co-op, it helped me to build my confidence so that when I did go out into the workforce after I finished college, I didn't feel so green. But it also helped me by getting hands-on experience by people that were working in the field. And, we can't just throw our young people out there and expect them to learn on their own. So they might as well start this while they're in school with the support of the system, with the support of the city. And the mayor can lead that charge by partnering with stakeholders like businesses of many of the organizations represented on today's call.
Great, Jessica. And I love the fact that you called out small and medium-sized businesses, because too often they just go to big business. Excellent point. Somebody else, what would you tell the mayor? What would you suggest to the mayor?
I'd be happy to go next. So we are so privileged in New York City. 80% of our incoming freshmen at CUNY come from the New York City public school system. So we know exactly how many have had summer youth employment or paid internship experiences through other places. I think it should be a requirement for every incoming student at CUNY to have a paid work experience prior to coming. And if they don't have it at the point of, admissions into CUNY, we have that bridge summer where every student coming into CUNY should actually have a paid work experience. And so really tweaking, because we have the resources, we have the employers, we have the partnerships, we have the data. How do we make sure that this kind of idea and mentality and ethos of work matters is something that every single incoming freshman has? We are so close yet so far. So that would be what I would implore a new mayor to really think about.
Great, Angie. Jared?
Yeah, I would love to add, I would implore the mayor to think about new and kind of innovative school models, specifically high school models. The majority of students in the New York City public school system are going through the same type of educational system that hasn't been working for the past however many decades at this point. And at the Brooklyn STEAM Center, we've really been able to see what it's like when you change up that model and put the agency in the students' hands to be able to understand what their learning is, what their interests are, expose them to different types of careers and give them these, or provide them these different skills. We would love to see Brooklyn STEAM Center, around in each borough, not shameless plug there for us, but we also think that there's a lot that can be learned from the Brooklyn STEAM Center and other models like it across the city and across the country that New York City should take advantage of. So understanding how the Department of Education can work with these different models and really bring them into each of our schools so that students can get the most out of their experience.
That's such a good point. Throwing more money at 20th century models is not going to meet the needs of the 21st century. So important. Now, Alyssa, you're being very quiet, and I know you have something to add here because K-12 always has things that need to be improved, and teachers are at the core of that.
Alyssa actually had to leave a little bit early because she has another meeting to get to. So.
Oh no, we lost the teacher voice, but we'll get it back on the next one.
Yes, we will.
Someone put a question in the chat asking to explain how the co-op model, which many people may know from Northeastern and Drexel at the college level, how that would fit into this model. I don't know, again, another jump ball. Anybody else like to add something there?
I know that there's, I'm sorry, I know some manufacturers that have opportunities now. Granted, they may not be appropriate for all levels of high schoolers, but there are some that it's easy. Just get your hands on, get your hands dirty and get to work. That's what's more important than the specific companies or specific roles.
And I don't know whether anybody wants to fill in. I mean, I'll start a little bit by saying co-op and internship are often synonyms used interchangeably, but the one big difference is that a co-op is usually done for a big chunk of time, like a few week block, so that somebody can get it. Angie, I don't know whether you want to talk, or Jared, where you see the differences in this model between using the word co-op and using the word internship, or you may see no difference.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was also going to pull my lifeline and call Gerard Shields from City Tech, or Abby Jo, or Renee, or Jane, any of my colleagues from CUNY. I'd kind of invite you to talk about what it really looks like on the ground. But I think a simple answer is it's paid, it's significant credits, and it's usually a significant chunk of time, at least 6 to 12 months. That's at a highest level, but I would pull my CUNY lifeline to have anyone talk in more detail and kind of animate and amplify it a little bit better than I just did.
Angie, I'm happy to do it real quick. So again, this is Gerard Shields from New York City College of Technology. Angie's been, like I said in the chat, she's been our advocate, because in the School of Technology and Design, we are talking a group of students that are working towards professional licensure. So you have architects, engineers, other design professionals. And typically in the industry, these are, I almost hate to use the word internships because they are not simply training, but oftentimes they are doing what we like to call billable work. So students are getting paid for what we almost tend to use the term part-time work, because they are usually not working a full 40-hour week. We have many programs where they are in trainee positions receiving essentially part-time or salaried positions for 6 months to a year and a half. Some of our biggest partners are the public agencies, such as the Department of Buildings, the Department of Transportation, the MTA, where they are looking for students that have exactly our skill set. Again, people who can immediately come in and provide meaningful work from the get-go. And these are all, again, working towards licensure. So I want to thank Angie because she has really opened up a number of opportunities for us. And one thing we have realized, similar to what Angie said, is that these experiences shouldn't be starting just when they come towards higher education, towards their training there. Jared, again, I know we've been going back and forth with the Brooklyn STEAM Center. We have definitely recognized that we need to start these training experiences much earlier on, because what we're finding is that when students have these internship experiences already into the college experience, sometimes they recognize they're in a pretty close discipline, but not quite right. And we'd hate to see them lose time in the form of their progression in getting their degree, where if they had the ability to start sooner, such as at the high school level, they have opportunities to try out a few of the majors, see if they're in the right area. So that way, when they're embarking on an associate's or bachelor's or beyond, they know exactly where they need to be. And so I want to definitely advocate for at Angie's 3+3 model, because the more opportunity they have earlier on, the better. And they come out with, again, CUNY is the engine for upward mobility. So they come out immediately with very well-paid, good benefit jobs, which is exactly what they're looking for to support their families. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. And Abby, I just want to pull you in a little bit because I know you put some things in the chat and everybody's not watching the chat. I think that for people outside of projects, they hear internships, they hear apprenticeships, they hear co-op, they hear the umbrella of work-based learning, and they're confused. Do you want to take just a minute to say how the key distinguishers are going to work to make that language a little clearer?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this goes back to the conversation we had at the first task force meeting, when it used to be that you could paint a green building green, and that was called a green building. And there was no agreement on definitions and what it was. And so the key distinguishers really seeks to provide definition based on what experts like those on this task force know and do every day. And the key distinguishers, this is, the initial iteration is like, okay, what are the key elements, those 8 key elements? But then we can say for a co-op, this is how you define it. It has to be X, Y, and Z. And we're we're comparing it against those quality standards and practice standards that we've developed together. For instance, we probably should make sure there's a threshold in terms of quality and numbers of hours. And that will come out as we move forward with the key distinguishers work. And really, again, as we peel back the onion and say, okay, for a paid work experience, what are we talking about here? There's an internship that looks like this. There's a co-op that looks like this. There's a youth apprenticeship that looks like this. And that therefore we are then able to point people, and as we mobilize more and more champions of this work, which we all know we need to, both at our institutions and more broadly, we'll be able to have clear definition of what we're talking about.
Oh, I think that's really helpful. Now, of course, it won't surprise you, Jessica and Jared, I want to come to you. Jessica, as a unique employer, how would this help you to be clear on all this language? And Jared, as you're trying to sell this idea of various work-based learnings to 400 employers, how would that help you? One of you start.
Well, as a special employer, it's great to use the same language because so many times we operate in the silo. We're a small business, we're a family-owned business, so we're an outlier. But to use common shared language, then whether we're talking to competitors, whether we're talking to clients, whether we're talking to agencies, then it demonstrates that we understand the challenges and that we're working in unison. So those things are important to us. And that's part of the reason why we thought it would be key to be part of the task force and share our thoughts today. So thank you for having us.
Thank you. Jared?
Definitely, completely agree with Jessica. I would just add that on the Navy Yard side, it really helps us tie up what we're doing. So we have a lot of different programs, whether those are internships, apprenticeships, fellowships, everything kind of under the sun for our employers. And it gets confusing when you try to, on your side, understand what the differences are, but you don't have that shared language with the employer to say this is what you're preparing for when you take on these students. So on one side, it really just helps us understand, it helps employers understand what they're signing on to. It also helps develop, the key distinguishers in general help develop a shared language around why it's important to do a lot of this work. So when we're coming into conversations with employers talking about why they need to be involved in our advisory council for the STEAM Center and why these competencies are important, we can take the key distinguishers and say, this is the reason why you're coming to the conversation, and this is what the benefit it has for students, as opposed to trying to make up something or develop something on our own that employers may not latch onto as closely.
Well, and I don't want to put Leyla on the spot, but being clear, and unless she wants to be put on the spot, if she has a spare moment, being clear to students as to what the time expectation is, what the level of proficiency upon entry is expected to be, all of those things make it much easier for students to decide, do I want an internship? Do I want a co-op? Do I want an apprenticeship? So Leyla, if you're here, you can give your words. If not, I'll move on.
No, I have something to say to
Okay.
that. You can hear me, right?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, great. Okay, great. I had to switch devices. But that's one of the main things that students really look into when it comes to internships or co-ops or opportunities and programs is, like what they have to do, like deadlines and stuff like that, and even money wise too. Like, obviously, we're teenagers, we just want money, we just want to spend it on whatever we want to. But honestly, like that's been one of our weaknesses, and one weaknesses that I've identified. Sorry, hold on, give me. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm back. But that's been one of the weaknesses.
We've all gotten used to screaming and barking and lawnmowers during Zoom, so don't you worry about it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's just like, the kids just keep coming. But yeah, that's been one of our weaknesses. A lot of students, like, they would love the programs that we're offering them or internships, and then they'll be like, oh, I can't meet the deadline. Like, as of today, I also have another work-based learning job, and I'm working with SYP and trying to get students to meet the deadline, to turn in their applications and papers and stuff like that. And that's just been one of the main struggles, because students don't read emails, they don't read text messages, they don't even answer. But I mean, it's still something that again, students have to learn over time. They kind of have to they need that extra push. They kind of have to get told many times, hey, you have to do this, you have to do that. But I mean, it's mainly common for teenagers, especially in high school, for all grades, because we'd never gotten the opportunity to understand responsibility and independency and doing what we need to do. But yeah, that's just pretty much it.
You already sound like you're a pretty good multitasker. And by the way, I hate to burst your bubble here, but those of us who have been in the workforce can tell you that many of our colleagues don't read emails or answer or return phone calls. So maybe your generation can unlearn all those bad behaviors, but believe me, you'll be a step or many steps ahead of us. Now, you've been very quiet, Kilsys.
I know, I actually wanted to add something.
Oh, good.
Being said right now, because something that comes up often, especially at Braven with our fellows, is they're like, okay, great. They don't understand maybe the importance of having an internship, right? If you have at least 2 internships while you're in college, you're twice as likely to get a job afterwards, because employers see that as a gauge of you being able to do the work. But what we really need to understand, and what we need to mold employers around, is that they have to be paid, and you have to be able to communicate why it's important to students, because students from underrepresented communities, they're working, right? They have jobs because they need to put food on the table. They have to support their families. They have to pay rent. They're paying tuition or whatever the case may be. So oftentimes there's a tension between, well, I need this internship because it's going to make me look more attractive, versus, well, guess what? I have to eat, or I have to pay my rent and so forth. So the workforce community, employers need to make this, definitely paid and attractive for them, so that they're not basically choosing to go work like in a retail job, but there's nothing wrong with it, but that's not necessarily going to further their career. So there's also that really needs to be lifted up. That is not as simple as they don't want, they going out and getting the internship. It's what do they feel that they're giving up because of it, right? Because they truly are in certain situations that it's really difficult for them. And that's just something that I really want to highlight, because I hear that time and time again from our students. And employers need to understand that they have to be paid, and the hours need to be accommodated around their schedules.
Absolutely. I mean, if not, they're balancing their unpaid internship, their schoolwork, and a paying job, and that's just and home, responsibilities. That's just not going to happen. Something's got to give, and unfortunately, what will give is too often their academic studies or their vocational studies, and that shouldn't be. That's a draconian decision. So, and I think now is the time that we say the only people who can afford to do unpaid internships are the top 10% of earners, and shame on us if we allow that to continue. I mean, they should not be able to build their networks while other people don't get to build. I think these are such good points. And Abby, I know we've had such great discussion. We could go on. Can you give us another hour? Because I have 100 questions, but I want to point out how enthusiastic the reception has been. I don't know whether all the speakers have been able to follow the chat, but there's a million +1s and yes and this. So please know that you hit it out of the park. You did such a wonderful job. And I'm thrilled to say to you, Abby, I pass it back to you, and I know we're in for a treat.
Thank you, Jane, and hats off to all the panelists. That was just incredible, and thank you for sharing, and for everybody on the task force for all your questions and the ongoing discussion back and forth. There's just so much learning that we have in this room, and making sure that we share it amongst ourselves and beyond is so important for moving this work forward. So Jane, Jessica, Kilsys, Leyla, Gerard, Angie, thank you all so much for sharing your efforts and experiences with the key distinguishers and how you use them to make high quality work-based learning possible for more and more young people each day.